Yesterday, we all heard the very sad news about Vera having died. And I must admit that with all the memories that it brought back and seeing the old soldiers on screen, I think it would have been a tougher person than me to avoid crying a few tears because she's meant so much and held up so much hope for so many of us um, over the years, over 103 years. And it made me think also on Desert Island Disc this morning, Joe Wicks was on, and such a different person, but in so many ways so inspirational to another generation of people, and standing for just what one person can signify to other people and how much they can buoy up the spirits of other people. And that got me thinking about all the other things that have been so much in the news this week about recognition of people's place in society. And it struck me that I can't remember a single statue that's ever been erected for a critic. And there are plenty of critics around right now, but I can't think of a single statue that's been erected to one. And I can't remember a single critic complaining that they haven't got a statue erected to them. And I thought, well, that's quite interesting. And then I thought myself back to 43 years ago when, there are various mantras, because it's not just women who are fashion conscious, the whole world is so aware of fashion. And in those days, we had this thing to do with education, and it was the vast importance of the 3 R's, and that was reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I'm sure you get the joke there, because educationists are really, really witty people. But there it was out there, and that's what we had to focus on. And I remember when I went into recruitment to start off with, that every managing director I met told me that all they were really interested in was recruitment and retention of staff. And I thought, well, that's 2 R's, and that's good, that's sensible. And so the whole focus of our company has always been on extending the period of time anyone would stay in their role by ensuring that there was a really good fit between the dynamics of what the applicant was looking for and what the client was looking for. So together they could grow and give good service to each other, and that would make sure that retention was really high up there. And there are bags of examples of that happening. But then I thought, well, if, Mr. Managing Director, the most important thing to you is recruitment and retention because staff are at the centre of your well-being, why haven't you got an HR director on your main board? And that question kind of hung in the air on many occasions, because to this day, there are very few companies that have an HR director on their main board. And why should that be when everyone seems to think that people are at the center of the success of their business? Well, I think the clues are often in language. And I think it's interesting that people were referred to as resources. Well, resources, that sounds a bit like petrol or engines, or doesn't sound much like a person to me. And I think the moment you're thinking about resources in that way and using that language, people cease to have an individual identity. And perhaps that's what so much of the talk is about right now, about the well-being of people, about the fitness of companies to run, about the survival of businesses, and why there's so much conversation now about how are we going to make people successful? How are we going to make people happy? How are we going to retain them? And a rather different view of how to do that. And because we've all been locked up in our homes, I think we've stopped talking now about the preferences for a beanbag to sit on, or is it a kneeling chair, or is it a bed? All those fashionable ideas of what's best, what's going to help recruit people into the environment is rather evaporated, because we're all at homes. We're in our attics, in our sitting rooms, in our studies, wherever we might be. So that one's gone out the window. But what stayed very firmly in our thoughts is flexible working. And just how is that flexibility going to work? How are we going to have an agile workforce and also make sure that they're going to be productive? And I think that this is a fantastic time for HR to really establish itself as being the emotional center of an organization. Because if people are not machines, if they have emotions, then surely there should be a central emotional core to represent them. And that's the opportunity, I think, for HR right now. And I think if they were to do a wonderful analysis of productivity, absenteeism, well-being, if they were to ask staff, what are they missing about the office and what would they like to have back? How would they like to share their time with their families, with their children, racing to and fro to pick up, the length of time children are spending in their schools and in their nurseries. If that kind of a survey were done right now, I think it would bring out the most wonderful opportunity for HR to shine in terms of bringing out statistics that can really help to steer the strategy behind a business. I've been around for so long, I've seen people try and make money by amalgamating companies, bringing them together. Well, if that company makes so much turnover a year and another one makes that much, put them together, you've got the two combined. That's a marvelous idea, except you can't manage when you do it to get the two groups of people to walk in through the front door because they dislike each other and what they stand for. They see no reason, no validity for working together because they don't have shared objectives or shared cultural values. And I think it's time and enough now for HR to really make the contribution that they can to speak for their workforce and reflect back to the board, because they're at the table, what it is the staff are crying out for, what it is that will help retain, help recruit people, and help their sense of well-being and therefore the prosperity of the organization. So I hope that HR grabs that opportunity. I hope they are placed on main board tables. And I hope also that the relevance of them as people who can coach not only their staff, but also the managers into better leadership roles. I hope that's recognized as being a serious objective that all organizations should be looking at in order to have the sensitivity for the kind of level of engagement that's needed for the returning staff to feel appreciated and treated as individuals and humans. I think that's very important.